Well, my quesadilla doesn't have cheese in it, like that's how you mess it up.
But also cheese dip was basically like
It was so nasty. Yeah. It's what? It's like cheese dip. You know when it's hot, when it gets cold and has like that was the whole
It's just
thing.
quiet.
Yeah. And it was, they just
Is
brought
this
it.
less quiet?
No.
Is this good? So those in the back? How's your sight line there? Back there? Yeah? Okay. Oh, okay. Here we go. All right. Thank you, Dewardrick. Good evening. Good evening. My name is Martha Johnson. I'm the director here at the Maier Museum of Art, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to this evening's lecture presented by Dr. Kat Owens. We were delighted here at the Maier when Randolph professor Karen Warren approached us last summer, inviting us to collaborate with her department in hosting Kat Owens, scientist, artist, activist. We are grateful to Dr. Warren for her inclusive, interdisciplinary approach and have so enjoyed being part of the Kat Owens experience, which continues this week and on into the spring as her exhibition in the Student Center remains on view through May 20th. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Warren, who will introduce our special guest tonight. Dr. Karen Warren is professor and Herzog Family Chair of Environmental Studies and Science at Randolph College, co-chair of the college's Sustainability Council, faculty advisor for the Environmental Club, and campus liaison for the President's Climate Commitments, B Campus, and the Udall Fellowship. She also coordinates the Science Day for Little Scientists event for Randolph's Science Festival. She helped found and is the coordinator of the Lynchburg Regional Community Climate Resilience Coalition, serves as president of the Association for Environmental Studies and Science, on the research committee of the Virginia Foundation of Independent Colleges, and as secretary of the executive board of the 500-Year Forest Foundation. She collaborates with her undergraduate students in community-based research projects on equitable strategies for climate resilience and old growth forest conservation. Karen and I started at the college around the same time, 20 plus years ago, and I've been fortunate to watch her create and grow the environmental studies program here. It's been a real privilege to witness that incredible transformation firsthand. She has done so much for the strength and the good of this institution. Thank you, Karen. And please welcome Dr. Karen Warren.
Good evening, everyone. Such a pleasure to look out and see everyone here for this evening's exciting event. And Martha, thank you for that very kind introduction. It's now my great pleasure to introduce my colleague and friend, Dr. Kat Owens. I would like to begin by acknowledging everyone involved in making these events with Kat possible at Randolph this week. First of all, the wonderful team at the Maier Museum, including Director Martha Johnson, Curator of Education, Laura McManus, Administrative Manager Kathleen Fort, and Museum Guard and Preparator John Spanich, who was particularly instrumental in ensuring that the installation in the Student Center was successful. They have not only hosted this evening's event and the refreshments to follow, but they've been instrumental in working with Kat for months, planning the exhibit in our Student Center, as well as preparing for tomorrow's Craftivism workshop, which we encourage you to attend tomorrow from 2 to 4 p.m. Drop in any time. The Maier Museum is a treasure, and I hope you will all take the opportunity to I wrote pursue, but I meant peruse. Don't touch anything, we're not allowed to touch. Peruse the current exhibit while you're here, and of course the pieces in the permanent collection in the galleries. I would also like to thank Dr. Andrea Campbell, who's here this evening, and her students in Museum and Heritage Studies who assisted the Maier staff in installing several of Kat's pieces in the Randolph Student Center and are giving tours of the exhibit as part of their class. That exhibit is on display through May 20th, and I encourage you to go have a look. The pieces there are really stunning and beautiful, as you'll see this evening. I'd also like to thank the Campus Events Committee for contributing funds for these events, and a huge shout out to my treasured colleague, Sarah Soiga, in Environmental Studies and Science, who enthusiastically supported our department's effort to bring Kat to campus. Kat's visit is part of our celebration of Randolph College's new program in marine science, which offers BA and BS degrees and a minor program. Developing marine science was Sarah's idea, and we're excited to have this new program as part of Randolph's curriculum. So now to introduce you to our guest speaker, Dr. Kat Owens. I met Kat in 2016 at a workshop at the Association of Environmental Studies and Science Conference on the art of engagement, invigorating course assignments with the arts. I was there to show how I used the Maier Museum's collection in teaching environmental science classes. Kat was one of the workshop leaders, and I was immediately inspired by the work that she does with her students and in her community, and also delighted by her warm, inquisitive, and engaging personality. Kat's background is truly interdisciplinary in the way that is especially pertinent to those of us in the liberal arts. She is a true interdisciplinary scholar who merges science, policy, and the arts. Kat is also a National Geographic Explorer and Fulbright Nehru Fellow. In addition to National Geographic and the Fulbright Foundation, her work has been funded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Stevens Initiative, the Middletown Commission on the Arts, and the Connecticut Office of the Arts. She's collaborated with Virgin Voyages and Lindblad Expeditions National Geographic to infuse ocean voyages with art and science. I really want to go on one of those trips. They look like so much fun. Kat has worked on plastic pollution projects in places as varied as Connecticut, United States, Kerala, India, and Svalbard in the Arctic Circle. She is also professor and chair of the Departments of Politics, Economics, and International Studies at the University of Hartford in Connecticut. In 2021, Kat created Entangled and Ingested, a multi-year project to construct life-size portraits of animals harmed by plastic pollution by hand-sewing plastic film on canvas. The largest pieces are co-created in public sewing workshops. In her work, Kat seeks to continually push the boundaries between art and science, using the arts to explore some of the most pressing environmental problems of our age. She hopes working with communities to examine plastic pollution and to advocate for better policy can lead to comprehensive change. So now please join me in welcoming Dr. Kat Owens to share her work with us here this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Karen, for that lovely introduction, and Martha, and everyone here who's been helping us. Well, you've been working for weeks, but helping me today as I adjust and get ready for this presentation. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm going to jump right in. Oh, I'm going to do it like that, yeah. So Karen mentioned already that my background is interdisciplinary, and I really feel like that defines my work. My first college degree was in studio art, and then I went back and did 2 other undergraduate degrees in anthropology and biology. And then I did a master's in environmental studies and then a PhD in sustainability and governance. And as I progressed through my career as a college professor, I felt more comfortable integrating the arts back into my work. I didn't do it as a brand new professor, but I worked up to that over time. And this is just a brief slide about what we're going to do. And my work in the last 25 years has really focused on water and water pollution. In the last decade, it's mainly been focused on plastic pollution. And as I'm sure many of you, or maybe all of you already know, plastic pollution is a huge problem. I tend to focus on single-use plastics. And you may or may not be aware that in the 1950s, globally, we were producing about 5 million tons of plastic. And now it's upward of 350 million tons each year. And on the publicly available websites and information from the plastics industry, they make it crystal clear that they want this number to increase every year. No bones about it. And so many people say, well, that's fine, let's just recycle. But I'm sure you've also heard that most of the recycling that we're kind of promised doesn't happen. 95% of plastic packaging globally is not recycled, and 90.5% of all plastic ever made has never been recycled. So the idea of recycling is not really the solution that we're looking for. And don't get me wrong, plastics are a miracle material, right? Imagine this room without the benefit of plastics, or try to get through a day without touching plastic. It's truly everywhere. But some of the things that make it really useful as a material can make it a huge problem for the environment. And this is just a few of the things that make it a problem. I'm going to go into each individually. Plastics don't break down quickly, they harm wildlife, they worsen the issues of invasive species, they create a toxic soup in our oceans, it costs a lot of money to clean it up, and then it worsens climate change at every stage in its life. So in terms of breaking down, we don't know how long it will take for many plastics to break down. We're still figuring that out, because it's not just about the thickness or the type of material, but it's also the conditions in which it's found. So if it's underwater at the Mariana Trench, a plastic bottle there is going to break down much more slowly than it's going to break down on a coastal situation, right, where it's being exposed to oxygen, wind, sunlight, all that kind of stuff. But we're still really figuring that out. One of my friends likes to say, if Shakespeare had worn disposable diapers, those diapers would still be on our planet. So that means all the diapers that have ever been used are still on our planet and will be for several hundred years. I should say the next few slides include images of animals that are disturbing or really sad. So if that's not something you want to look at, please feel free to not look at the next couple of slides. So this is a photograph of the lace and albatross. It's by the artist Christopher Jordan. You might be familiar with his work. He does amazing work around environment and our impact on the planet. The lace and albatross is a species that nests on the Midway Islands, which is near the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And so what happens, right, they set up their nest, the adult birds go out and look for food, they bring it back to their young, but instead of food, what they're really often finding are pieces of plastic, as you can see here. So it fills the stomachs of their young, so much so that there's not enough room in there for them to intake the calories that are needed to grow and thrive and eventually fledge. So instead, many of them don't make it. There's a great documentary by the BBC called Hawaii Message in the Waves, where they send this sort of like surfer girl over to view it, and she goes to a field that's just littered with the carcasses of lace and albatross. So that's the sort of story of ingestion. Entanglement is also a huge issue for wildlife. So this is a photo that was shared on a listserv I'm a part of by Helen Master of the Phillip Island Nature Parks in Victoria, Australia. It's of the Australian fur seal. And she said when this animal was brought into their clinic, they at first thought that maybe it had been hit on the back of the propeller because it has a sort of gash on its shoulder, let's say. But in working with the animal and trying to save it, they actually found that this small piece of twine, and I can't tell if it's strapping from a package or something else, a piece of balloon string, but using the ruler, I can tell that it is a small and relatively lightweight piece of plastic, and yet it caused so much damage to this animal that it did not survive its injuries. They taxidermied the remains to use as a teaching tool. So it doesn't even really have to be a big piece of plastic, right, to have a big impact on wildlife. So a lot of what we know about the species that are affected by plastic pollution through entanglement and ingestion comes from the work of David Lace, who in 1997 wrote a book chapter where he really just cataloged the records he pulled from, people who were studying turtles or sharks or what have you. He just made a list. I mean, those were the days when you could get a publication from just making a list, but those days are over. And it was a list of all the species records from entanglement, ingestion, or both. So even then, 1997, more than 20 years ago, there were more than 250 species affected. Stephanie Kuhn and her colleagues a few years later in 2015 did an update of that research, and they found at that time the number had already doubled. Now I should say 2 things are happening during this time period. Yes, there's more plastic pollution in the ocean between 1997 and 2015, but this also became an issue that we are studying during that time. So I think we have to acknowledge that as well. When people are looking for this information, right, of course they're going to find it more. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay, if you were not looking, you can look now. It's safe. So plastic debris also worsens the issue of invasive species. You probably know, especially all of the environmentalists in the room, that invasive species cost a lot of money and can be detrimental to an ecosystem. So imagine how far a piece of driftwood can go, and then imagine how much farther a piece of plastic can go. And it's not that necessarily mammals are hitchhiking from one ecosystem to another. On plastic, it can be bacteria or microorganisms, and researchers have a lot of concerns about what the impact will be from that over time. And then, of course, plastic breaks down. You have probably heard about it, I've already mentioned it, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It's one of several gyres around the globe where plastic accumulates. It's not, as many people believe, a sort of floating island of trash. It's more like a churning soup of debris with pieces that are, just imagine like if you put plastic in the washing machine. They're getting smaller and smaller, and the number of pieces are increasing. And that's a huge environmental problem. And it also costs money, so much money to clean up. I've been on beach cleanups where we pick up thousands of pieces of debris, and we come back, and it's not like the next time we go, there's no debris there. It just comes right back. And it's often taxpayers and local governments who are paying to clean it up, not the people responsible for profiting off of it, or volunteers with their time who are paying in a way to clean it up. And we can't talk about plastic without thinking about climate change, right? Because plastics worsen climate change at every stage in their life, whether from their extraction and transport, if they're made from fossil fuels, which most of them still are, to the refining and the manufacture. This is a $6 billion plant that just came online this year outside of Pittsburgh, using a $1.65 billion tax credit to use fracked gas and turn it into plastic. So when we think about energy in the United States, when we think about our resources, do we really know that all that fracking, all the damage from fracking is just going to make more plastic that we're probably going to throw away? I don't think many people know that. So it's throughout these stages then, of course, when it becomes waste, which is when I encounter it, and it gets in the environment. But at every stage, plastic makes the issue of climate change worse. This is the moment where I tell my students, don't panic. Even though this sounds terrible, and it does sound terrible, I do believe we always have room for hope when we study the environment. And what the research says is that this is a problem that can be solved. And it can be solved if we tackle the root causes, if we think locally, if we consider human behavior, try to educate people, and use that to create strong policy. So I read this research, and based on this research, I decided to apply to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to get funding to see what this problem looked like in my backyard in Connecticut on the Long Island Sound. So in 2016, I applied But I did think, I'd love to include the public in it because it's practical, but also because it's fun to work with the public. And so in that summer, I started going to camps, mostly kids camps in Hartford, West Hartford, and Middletown, which are the towns where I work and live. So this is a free center in Hartford. Oh, other way. This is also from the free center. We're working on the minke whale, which is here. And that's the finished product of the minke whale, 18 feet long. And what's really cool, you can't see it here, but everybody who works on it signs the back. And especially the kids, they write all kinds of funny, crazy things. They draw pictures, they do a lot of interesting things. And you can see that because of the way they're displayed here. You can see some of that. Then I started working on the sperm whale. This is at my kids' elementary school. It was a pajama day. They don't dress like this on normal days. And I just started taking these sort of panels. They're 6 feet tall and 60 feet long. That's a short one. To different places to try to work on them. And then there's a Woolworths on Main Street, a former Woolworths in Middletown where I live. And the downtown business district, it's abandoned. They let me use it to put out the sperm whale because really there's no way to do a piece of artwork that size without a giant ring. I learned the hard way. So it was open to the public. While I was teaching my regular classes, I would come in like one day a week. I would come in most weekends, some evenings, and work on it and invite the public to come and work too. Here you can see a big group of people sewing away, and you can kind of see it start to take shape. And there it's kind of taking shape a little bit more as well. And then you can see the sperm whale, which is on your cards, but there I am on the left-hand side for scale. And it's right now, if you're ever traveling regionally in Connecticut, it's at the Bradley Airport in Windsor Locks, Connecticut, for at least 6 months. This is, we hung it up at the University of Hartford for 6 months in their library, and that was kind of cool because we did it in front of the windows. It's a completely different look. It's more like stained glass. And then this is it at the airport. It just got installed this December. And that's the team that helped do it with 3 cranes. Yeah, or I don't know what they're called, but things that go up and down. And then the last big whale from this series was the bowhead whale. And it took a really long time to do it, mainly because I didn't have access to that studio space on Main Street in the Woolworths any longer. This is at a local elementary school. They let me bring it by for an afternoon. That's also at Snow School in Middletown. You can see it's taking shape. Then the folks at the American Mural Project in Winston, Connecticut, which is a really neat, long-term public art project as well. They have a giant space, so they let me come in and use their floor for a day, which was great. And here it is, mostly finished. Between you and me, it still needs a little bit of work under the whale, but for now, it was enough to take a photograph of it. And then you can see me here for scale. So that's the final one of that first series of 46 pieces. And I've started the second series. In the Kuhn et al. Article that came out later, there are an additional 73 species for which there are records of both entanglement and ingestion. So I'm working on that 73 now. And it's taken shape of mostly collaborative projects. Oh, I'm sorry, I should have warned you. This is the sad image. Look away if you're not interested. So 73 species for the new group. And so here are some of them. I've been experimenting with a lot of different things. This I did in small panels. I think they're about a foot by a foot. But I wanted to kind of lean into the idea of a quilt here. So we divided them diagonally, and I encouraged people who were helping to do a color on each one and sort of lighter in the top, darker in the bottom. It's the pygmy sperm whale, which is 20 feet by 10 feet. Then we have the pygmy right whale. This is hanging at the Durham Fair in Connecticut. Again, I went with small squares to try to, it's just practical. It's a big part of it, but I really like the way it looks. It's a very different kind of look. Though I didn't dictate with this one at all what the background should be. I just let people do whatever they liked. And then I've done a couple on with a collaboration with Virgin Voyages, which is a cruise line. I've never been on a cruise before that, but they have no single-use plastics at all, which I believe is very unique for that industry, and certainly for the tourism industry at large. That's almost unheard of. So they invited me to go on a transatlantic cruise from Spain to Miami, and then also I've gone from Miami to Spain, and lead a series of workshops during that 2-week period. And believe me, hands down, that's the best perk I've ever had from my job. It was really great. So we did the striped dolphin, the common dolphin, and the rough-toothed dolphin. I've done 3 of those trips with them so far. And then with the local middle school, we did the Tucuxi, which is a river dolphin from the Amazon, I believe. And then this was a project with elementary schools in my town, in Middletown, where we created this 24-foot-long portrait of an orca. And you can see the sort of rainbow stripes. Each of those is a panel that I would take to the school and have one crazy day of like kids coming in and sewing, and I mean, it was just madness. Several days I got there and I would say, okay, where are the parent volunteers who are going to sign up? And they're like, no one could come. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to make it happen. It was a lot of fun. And I think it turned out really well. You can't see the chaos in the final product at all. And then this is another one, an albatross from the second series. So that's really the only one from the second series that I've done on my own. Everything else has been a collaborative work so far. So that project in Uganda never happened. I never got to travel to Uganda to do it. Hannington and Spita and I eventually were able to each do research on rivers in our own community and then compare them. That's sort of how that project landed. And for my own work, I'm still trying to understand and figure out how I want to incorporate arts and sciences. And I'm trying to push that. I mean, I think we're very comfortable as a society with arts illustrating scientific concepts or helping explain, but I believe that we can use them as a way to build knowledge, to learn new things. That's just another tool in the toolbox. And so I'm sort of working towards figuring out what that means for me and my work. And so I, through National Geographic, I got invited to go with them on a trip to Svalbard, which is north of Norway in the Arctic Circle. And this was a 10-day trip on a small vessel, and the way they market the trip is that it's all about polar bears. So the idea is that I would keep a sketchbook and create watercolors of this voyage, especially through the lens of plastic pollution and climate change. So Svalbard is a place that has more polar bears than people. I mean, there really aren't that many people there. But there are also a good number of polar bears. And we would go to a beach, isolated, no one lived anywhere near there, and we would see plastic on the shore. I saw a polar bear, it was really sad, but someone on the ship leaned over and their sunglasses fell into the water. And the polar bear, as we watched them for like an hour and a half, eventually picked up the glasses and was playing with them. And it was heartbreaking. You know, we're there, and I have a lot of feelings about whether we should have been there at all. But in this case, I think it was complicated, yeah. So I was recording all of those kinds of experiences, the things I was seeing, and then just sort of trying to do watercolors of what we were doing every day. So I'm just going to quickly show those pieces for the journal. It was beautiful, really unbelievable. We circumnavigated Svalbard, and this was at the end of June. Normally, it would have been impossible because of glaciers, but we were able to do it at that time because the glaciers had receded enough to make it possible. We did some ice breaking, so it wasn't a clear path. We ice broke for one whole night, which was crazy. I'm not going to go into all the stories, but yeah, it was an amazing experience. That's the glasses polar bear. I don't have them with the glasses because that was just too sad, but yeah, so I'm hoping to just continue to get the opportunity to try to integrate art and science. And with the 73 portraits of the second series, I kind of have my work cut out, for the next 5 years or so. And I hope to, continue to use watercolors and other things as well to try to capture the way we are impacting the planet. So I do try to end on a note of hope, right? And have you think about the ways we can all change things to make this better. Of course, you can refuse, reduce, reuse, and recycle. A lot of the waste I use tends to come from things at the grocery store, so I think using a CSA or a farmer's market can help with that. We have refill stores in my community, which are kind of a new thing, kind of an old thing that's a new thing again, but those can be great. I also really encourage people to talk to policymakers at every level about what they want from them in terms of laws and regulations around plastics, particularly single-use plastics. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
I found that very inspiring. But you tell us, to think locally. Mm-hmm. And one thing that has always surprised me in this country is how come we don't make the Walmarts, the Krogers, the Food Lions accountable to the use of plastics. We have to go to Aldi, which is a German-based company, to have cardboard for us. At Walmart and other places, they have those piles of plastic, and nothing is done locally to make them accountable. I wish there were pickets. There were people with signs. Stop the use of plastic. It is doing this kind of thing. Other countries, have forbidden countries. France, Germany, Spain. Nothing is done here. This is, a very optimistic conclusion that you have, but it's not going far enough.
Yeah, I hear you, and believe me, I get very frustrated with it as well. I do think that if enough people contact representatives and force them to address the issue, then they will. But, my home department is a politics department. So I also know that in a system where we allow lobbying, where we allow so much money to be in politics, we shouldn't be that surprised that corporations are kind of running the show and calling the shots.
Why is it so easy to be done in other countries and so difficult to be done in this country, honestly?
Yes, that's a big question. But I think it has a lot to do with the way money infuses our political system.
Of course.
And I know that happens to a degree everywhere. There can be corporate entities or working to try to make their business easier, but it's complicated. And I don't know. I know that I've tried and feel that we can do a lot at state and local levels, and that can eventually push to national level. There is the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which has come out in the last 2 Congresses. But think about what's happening in Congress, right? There's a lot going on there. And in many times, it feels like, as someone who studies the environment, that the environment gets pushed to the side for other things that seem more important or people believe are more important at the time. So, things like bag bans and things like that have happened because it's happened in coastal communities and then in states and then grown from there. There are a lot of push sort of on this issue that's happening in state legislatures is about extended producer reliability, or EPR laws. And the idea behind those laws is that the people who make the stuff should be responsible for it at the end of its life. And I believe Maine and Oregon are the 2 states that have put that through. But I don't know. I know in Connecticut we tried and then it got shot down. But I do believe that we can make a difference in our system. But I also know that policy change is often incremental. Yeah.
But students are interested in ecology. And I don't see many students, going to Walmart, in front of Walmart, with signs.
No, and I mean, and that, that can sort of kind of bother the people at Walmart, but I often, when I work with my students and we talk about activism, I tell them to focus on the kind of activism that is directly connected to legislation and leaders. You can sign an online petition, but where is that really going? I think like trying to advocate for policy with politicians can make a difference. And actually, they really listen to young people. When I go to the legislature, like, I'm a known entity, quantity, right, when I show up. They know exactly my whole game, right? But they care about votes, right? And they care about votes from younger generations. So I think students can be very powerful in terms of being active for anything they care about politically. But I also want to cut them some slack because we created this mess. And we're not even doing that much about it, and so I think sometimes it can be overwhelming and very depressing for students. I see that a lot for students in my classes, and so I always want to sort of think about what's the hopeful side of this.
Can I ask about the projects in Connecticut and India, which were partly to give information to local policymakers?
Mm-hmm.
What, if anything, resulted from those specific projects?
Yes, I'm happy to answer that, but it's not one of those sort of like end of the movie moments where we all change the politicians and things changed. We were able to present, well, for the NOAA grant, that's federal money, and so we were not advocating for any one policy. You're not allowed to do that for good reason. Instead, what we did was we said, this is what the problem looks like in our community, and here are different policies that people have implemented around the country to address this issue. So we sort of shared a policy brief with them. And we had a big meeting with the politicians. At the time, it was Senator Ted Kennedy Jr., who was the chair of the Environment Committee in Connecticut. He called the press, they showed up. It was really an exciting moment for my students with a bank of microphones and television cameras, and there was no change as a result of that action. But 2 years later, in the state of Connecticut, we implemented it's not a plastic bag ban, it's more like a plastic, they don't like to call it a tax. I don't know what they call it, but the end result is you're not supposed to use plastic bags anymore. And so, I don't credit my work to that. I think that's really a result of decades of work from environmental lobbyists there. And in India, it's an equally complicated story. It's also the case there that they can show up and share information with their leaders, and it's not necessarily the case that they change all the policy as a result of it. But I do believe that things grow over time, and just because you don't get immediate success, it doesn't mean you shouldn't keep trying. But good question.
I have two questions. First, you seem to be purposefully using brands and large and in view. Do you? I assume that's on purpose.
Yeah.
But also, have you ever gotten in trouble for that?
No, I mean, they've only been doing it for a few years. The big picture of the sperm whale, National Geographic puts out an annual Kids Almanac, and they were like, we're interested in using that drone photograph for our Kids Almanac this year. It's for this one, 2024. And we looked at a lot of different pictures with them, and they chose the whale because it's so far away that it's not as obvious what the brands are. I haven't gotten any, I guess my retort, if anyone does say something, is I won't include you in my art if you don't use plastic. So, it's sort of on them. I'm just an artist using the material I find in my environment. Yeah. And you said you have two questions? Was that both, or did I?
I was also wondering about the recycling data.
Yeah.
Is there such a thing as a real recycling program in the United States?
It's tough because you know, a lot of what we're doing is not even recycling. It at best would be downcycling. So that means a water bottle not being made into a water bottle again, but being made into something softer, you know, and some different kind of item. I mean, I still recycle at my house, but I don't put any foam plastics. You know, no foam plastics are curb recyclable anywhere in the United States. So that's anything that's like a mailer or a food wrapping that's soft. None of that is recyclable curbside in the United States. So I do recycle, but I don't put a lot of faith in it. I just don't think that a lot of what's happening is, you know, what we think is happening. And there have been some really interesting sort of investigative reporting kind of studies where they followed the places in some big box stores where you can drop off some plastics, like foam plastics, like bags, and they found that they're not really, you know, they're just being thrown away. I don't think that's the case for all of those, but in the investigative report that I saw, that's what happened.
So follow up, I assumed, I don't know where I learned this, but I thought that plastic was the most recyclable thing that there was, basically.
No, I think that's glass, maybe. It's so much cheaper to make new plastic. That's sort of what drives that decision making. Yeah. Dewardrick, did you have a question before?
Sure. Thank you for the presentation, very informative. I saw many of your pieces in the Student Center. Are there any pieces that you have duplicated, you know, any animals that you duplicated while doing that? And what are some of the animals that you have not used that you want to use in future endeavors that you may have?
Well, great questions. Well, one of my first duplication is actually going to happen to make a loggerhead turtle for the Maier Museum's collection. So I'm super excited about that. Yeah, I don't sell any of the pieces because I don't know how capitalism works, and because I want to see them all together. Like, that's my dream, to see them all together. And in terms of animals that I want to do, what's interesting is that this isn't exclusive to animals in the marine environment, or birds, or even the sort of wildlife that are talked about in these two articles. So actually, globally, cows ingest a lot of plastic. In India, of course, as you would probably imagine. But even I have an article I sometimes reference from American Beef magazine. I'm not a subscriber. I just found it on the internet, but about what they call plastic disease, which is when cattle in the United States just come across plastic film, which is ubiquitous in farming, and ingest it. And then elephants are another animal that encounter plastic a lot, and they have found are ingesting it. And so there's actually this kind of new area of research where people who study mountain lions and bears and all kinds of other things are starting to find records of ingestion, I think more than entanglement. But yeah, I've worked with several different researchers through National Geographic and other projects in different countries in Africa, and I kind of want to go and do like an elephant with some partners in Kenya. But yeah, so that would be really cool. I think that would be an amazing piece. Yeah.
Where do you get your plastic pieces that you use to create food?
That's a good question. So for about 5 years, I saved the plastic that my family uses. And I want to say that, but also help you understand I don't live in like a hoarding situation with like plastic everywhere. It presses down, you know, trim it, you know, and press it down and store it in like, and sadly, you know, like plastic containers in the attic. And so I had that for a while, and I was saving it because I couldn't figure out how to recycle it. Like I read that, you know, you can take a few things to like a Home Depot or a big box store like that, but most of it, there's just nowhere to put it. Even though it's stamped with those arrows, they can stamp those arrows on knowing that you can't do anything with it. It really puts the burden on us. So I did that for many years, and then I've used most of that. And I have several people in my community who save plastic for me. So I have one friend, every time we walk, she hands me a bag trash. Yeah, so, and sadly, it's not hard to accumulate plastic. It is so easy, yeah.
I was wondering, what was your moment where you decided you wanted to start making these art pieces? Like, what inspired you to do this?
Yeah, I had been experimenting with it for a little while, and I made some things that were interesting visually, but they didn't really have anything behind them. They weren't trying to tell any kind of story. So I made like a small beluga whale, and small for a beluga whale, and I made an octopus that was like 9 feet long. And I thought, well, this is cool, but there's really no there. So when I was stuck during the pandemic and just thinking about that Laced article, I was like, this is where the tools could meet the story. And so I experimented with that fairy penguin, which is the little blue penguin that was one of the first ones I showed you. And I was like, oh, okay, I like this. I'm gonna keep trying. And the great thing about a project made out of trash is that you can just try and see. You know, I didn't put a lot of money into it, and the canvas is really one of the few things that I have to purchase. So, yeah, that's why I did it.
It's wonderful to me, the interconnection of environment and science and politics and art that you have.
Thank you.
Because, but have you looked at, or do you express the depth of internalizing a concept through art, or through the arts, as a way to strengthen it, to strengthen what you're saying, to strengthen your message? It seems to me that's apparent.
Okay.
But, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes, you feel it.
Yeah. Thank you.
You don't just see it and hear it.
Yeah. I mean, for
But
me,
I
it's
can see for kids,
as an adult.
Yeah, as
Yeah.
an adult too, how powerful that would be. I don't know if there's any research. I know there's research, but.
I haven't looked at the research on sort of the impact of the artist and the viewer, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like it is where I,
Yeah.
When I talk to kids, sometimes I say, this is where I put all of my feelings about this problem, which they get. And yeah, so for a lot of times I'm trying to turn that pain into something nice to look at, which is I think what most artists are doing most of the time.
Can you talk a little about the workshop tomorrow?
Yes, but thank you. So it's going to be from 2 to 4, and the cards that are in front of you, it's a little confusing because this is talking about the humpback whale project, but this is a picture of the sperm whale. But the humpback whale will eventually be 51 feet long and 15 feet tall. And so the way that works in practice is that I brought about 20 3 by 3 foot panels with me, and there, if you come tomorrow, which I hope you will, I have, you know, a sketch that shows how it's all mapped out. And so you'll get a panel and work with several people on that panel. I have all the materials, needle, thread, and you can kind of use the picture as a guide. You know, if you have piece number 27, you can see it's like part of the eye or the fin, that kind of thing. So people will come in, they're welcome to spend as much or as little time as they like sewing. We say it's, wait, well, I can't remember it. I can't remember our saying about it, sorry. It'll come to me in like 10 minutes. But we want everyone to be willingly participating, not anyone unwillingly participating. So you're welcome to just come and look, or to sew as much or as little as you like, and everyone who works on it gets to sign the back.
And so to clarify, that is not here at the museum, that is in Main Hall, Student Center.
The main hall and the student center.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that what we will do is continue our conversations at our reception in Gallery 2. Please stay, we're not going to whisk Dr. Owens away. And enjoy the exhibition, the reception, and each other's company, and continuing conversations. Thank you so much.